Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Alana James, and I'm really excited to go have our second session of the Write Your Passion series. We're basing this on some premises which will change slightly every week. So last week we talked about the fact that the basic premise when we consider academic writers writing with passion is that any reader, even academic readers who are mostly in their heads, intuitively know when a writer cares deeply about their subject matter. And that's what we're calling passion, is that when we care deeply about our subject, about our reader catching on to what we say, about our reader actually taking our work further into our field, when those things matter to us, even if it's written in the most rigorous academic manner, that passion shows, and our readers, as a natural, basic human response, when we're presented with ideas that others care about, we pay more attention. So that was our basis for last week, and we had a lot of conversation about what is caring, and we ended the session with a short exercise, 4 questions, 4 sentence stems, and that take what we care about into an argument form. And then today, our premise is that if we follow the logic of argumentation, our research will more easily allow our caring or passion to show. And of course, a lot depends upon the context of our field. And then that's how we go forward. So we'll have lots of interesting conversations today. And already Adrienne said that she was thinking about turning her argument into chapter 2, which as a standalone, which is totally possible. One of the things that we talked about last session was that every chapter within the larger argument of the research, if you're doing a dissertation or a thesis, every chapter has its own internal argument. So yes, they can be standalone. And in fact, Adrienne, literature reviews are one of the easiest things to get published, or so I've been told. I've never actually done it, but I had a chancellor at one of the universities that I visited tell me that he had many of his students, the first thing they published was their review of literature. And the good thing about that was it gets cited a lot. So a good way to get a leg up on your publications if that's of interest. And that could be an excellent thing that you want to do in these 4 sessions too. All right, so our agenda for this week is to look at the 4 sentences. Now, we haven't had any of the 4 sentences come in from people, but I did a couple of examples from finished documents working backwards to what their 4 sentences would have been. And then we can take that and move past argument into the writing portion of it. So I've got some examples, and then we'll talk about using models. And then we'll have a few tips and tricks with some links you can use and resources. Now, if you go to the handouts section, you'll see there's quite a bit there. There's slides from last week, slides from this week, and then the 2 examples that I'm referring to if you want to dig deeper into my analysis of their work and whether or not you agree. So our first conversation, when we talk about moving from our basic argument into writing, is that it depends a lot on our particular field. So I have 2 examples, one from engineering and one from educational psychology, very different. The first one is a study by an engineer who was doing, the word is escaping me, a synthesis, a replication of things rather than a going out into the field and studying, but looking at archival data and doing a synthesis of what should happen and then looking at the data to see if that showed what the hypothesis was. And his 4 sentences would be something like this. My writing will claim that companies embracing a holacratic engineering management lean system will show significantly improved innovation. The evidence on which I build this will include a soft systems methodology employing multiple linear regression performed on 18 companies that design, develop, and deliver prepackaged software. Logically, the reader will be led to see that because of the results of the linear regression, improved innovation went hand in hand with employing holacratic engineering management practices, otherwise known as HEM in his document. Therefore, my discussion will point out that despite the challenges involved in the change to the lean approach, the results are undeniable. That was taken from my reading of the abstract. So let's see, giving it the most positive, passionate, caring spin I could. So let's check out what happened. Now, for those of you that haven't seen an analysis of a document before, the left-hand column is the 5 basic things that all research has, sometimes a little bit more buried than others, but we talk in terms of these 5 steps: our background, our literature, the methodology we use, the results, and our findings or conclusions. So in this case, and these are looking at the table of contents. So it's my premise, and I use this when I examine final documents for universities. It's my premise that your table of contents should tell me pretty much everything I need to know about what I'm going to find once I get into your document. That your headings should illuminate your logic and your way of moving forward, and I should be able to then pretty quickly identify the few places that you might have wobbles, that I might want to look more carefully. And in this case, of course, what I'm looking for is signs of a passionate or caring golden thread that runs through everything that ends up at his conclusion. So let's see what we find. In the background, for the first chapter, he called it background, and his headings were the problem statement, the purpose, the research questions, hypothesis, and an overview. Pretty normal, typical stuff. Doesn't tell us much about where he stands on the passion scale, but I could quickly click in and see what they were, and it was exactly what I would expect. Literature theory is what he called his second chapter, which was interesting because theoretical and conceptual frameworks can be in a couple places. They can be in the first, second, or third chapter. I've seen them in all 3. And he chose to put his theoretical in the second chapter, where he overviewed systems in general that engineering management uses. And then he had a pretty deep discussion of holacratic management and what could we expect. And then he transitioned from that into a discussion of the performance measurements, which in fact were the things he was going to do the regression on to see from the data which he had. So a good funnel took the reader through from overview to specifics and down to the methodology. Again, just really tightly written document. So he called his methodology chapter his contribution chapter, and which was interesting. I hadn't seen that before. And so he's thinking that in this case, that would clue to me that what was as important to him as the results of his work was the contribution, the way he did the work was making. And he had his research questions, he called it data collection and analysis, hypothesis, and then the variables he was studying. He called his results chapter implementation and methodology. And in that, he defined the process of the work he did, the model validations, and the study results. So that's a key, that what he finds important is, in fact, the how he did it as much as what he found. Perfectly valid. And again, if we're looking at our headings as a clue to where we're going and what you're telling your reader, he's right on track. And then finally, his findings, which he called his conclusions, the study outcome and future work. So just to tell you, I'm again on the looking out for passion. Engineers coming from an engineering family, I can say they're not generally the most overtly passionate people in their choice of language, usually pretty conservative. And this is his outcome statement. The study outcome confirms the claim of a relationship between the HEM adoption and innovation. From the simulation, we expect increasing levels of HEM component index measurements to result in improved innovation performance. The resulting MLR significance of F of 0.31 indicates a significant correlation. So he's proud of his results. They went along with what he wanted them to do. He's defining them. And then he goes on to say, these MLR results show statistically significant correlation, indicating the HEM component index values of role definition and equitable transparency, along with the dynamic system variable. Value-added percentage for intellectual property are predictors of innovation performance. This finding supports the claim that HEM component index values are related to employee innovation. The negative constant in the regression equation for defined roles indicates this HEM component negatively impacts innovative performance as it increases. This may be evidence that rigid job descriptions inside organizations where people specialize more are preferred over role-based work arrangements when increased innovation is desired. This supports the previously introduced statement about employee performance dropping off as they take on more than a handful of goals. And what I found was interesting, if we look at his work from a position of caring, is that it goes beyond the this is how it came out statistically conversation and leads to an almost human resources perspective and brings up some questions about that, which in my opinion was over and above what I expected to see, and therefore an indication of caring and passion. And welcome, Christy, and glad you got connected. We are recording, so if you missed anything, you'll have it in a day or so. Okay, so that's the first one. I wanted to compare and contrast, as I like to do. This is the second exercise is on teacher burnout. It's a educational psychology major from the University of New Hampshire, which is one of our partner universities. And I would say, again, she didn't write this, but I would say from her abstract that she would say, my writing will claim that audits of educators have added practices with the unintended consequence of increasing teacher burnout. The evidence on which I build this is a multi-case study of 3 teachers in New Hampshire addressing burnout, teacher efficacy, and the relationship between them. Logically, the reader will lead to see that burnout needs to be added to the audit practices and be discussed, or teacher efficacy will drop. And therefore, my discussion adds to the history and political understanding of teaching in the New Hampshire with positive results. Looking back on that, which I wrote just from the abstract, as I dug more deeply, I think I would disagree with myself, because when we follow this thread of what is the important structure and how is it coming out in the headings and findings, I think we actually see a slightly different picture. So again, the 5 things that we always see: background, literature, methodology, results, and findings. And she calls her background the introduction, and she starts with personal interest in the topic, the context for the study, her research questions, the definitions she uses, overview of how she collected her data, and the organization of the final document. Her literature is very straightforward, called literature, discusses, starts with an introduction, discusses burnout in depth, discusses teacher self-efficacy in depth, and then leads us into the methodological considerations, which drops us out into the methodology, research design, methods, and research activity and limitations being the 3 headings that are covered there. So, so far, pretty straightforward. This is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to discuss. And then the results chapter is called Beyond Burnout. And I think a great deal of both her passion and her caring begin to show up in this chapter. So she discusses the historical roots of educational audits. And then she tells us about the experience of the auditees that she studied, leading us into then some things that she's very passionate about: the deprofessionalization of teachers by treating them like they are widgets that can be counted in an audit. And then during an audit, with a tendency to reproduce the image of being a hard-working teacher, which results in small acts of resistance, and then the conclusions that she comes to. So different than I expected from her abstract reading after going through her results. And then her findings, which she calls reflection and discussion. Again, reflection being a word that has a great deal of herself in it. She talks about in review, she talks about emotional exhaustion, personal accomplishment, and teacher self-efficacy, digressing into her own study, looking towards the future directions with some limitations on this study, and then she closes. And I'll read you the closing in a minute. But what I want to point out here is that there's a circular emphasis in this that ultimately we always want to see in the 5 chapters. We want, I mean, it's a particularly lovely setup because she does take it back through the digression to her personal interest, which was the first thing in her background. So there's a circular motion, which is, it's not an easy thing to do. And not everyone does do it or do it well. And it isn't absolutely required, but it is a sense that you develop over time when you write research. So bravo to her on that. And then let me just read you in closing. And it's such a level of what I'm reading this because to me it was such a level of difference between the kind of passion and caring she can show as an educational psychologist involved in a human endeavor compared to an engineer who, and he did a very good job of caring about what it meant to the people who were working there, but she just has so much more leeway. As an educator and future district administrator, preventing teacher burnout is a project that will remain close to my heart, particularly in an era when assaults on public schools stem directly from the White House and the Secretary of Education. It is vital that we insulate our teachers from its effects. Beginning with A Nation at Risk, 1983, the United States has obsessed over why other countries are seemingly outperforming us. The one piece of data they do not scrutinize is teacher workload. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2014, the average secondary school teacher in the United States works 1,051 instructional hours per year. Instructional hours are defined as the time spent in front of students. They do not include time spent planning, grading, or collaborating with other teachers. In England, it's 695 instructional hours. In Korea, 609. In Finland, 553. And in Japan, 510. The value of this dissertation is in its historicizing and politicizing of the psychological constructs of burnout and teacher efficacy. As noted earlier, the purpose of educational psychology is to apply theory and science to explain why humans experience burnout the way they do, both within and across settings. But all too often, the way that this research talks about burnout and its related constructs limits the discussion to the constructs themselves. Additionally, this perspective does not take into account structural reasons for burnout while placing the burden on the individual teacher to remedy her situation over which she retains very little control. A political project similar to neoliberal solutions. Wow, what a difference. Two excellent, well-designed final documents and an incredible difference in how they use language. So that sets the stage for the rest of the conversation that we're going to have today. And welcome to all the people who came in later. It is being recorded, and so you can see the first one if you missed it. So now this is your time to reflect on your passion. And so I've given you these slides with the suggestion that you might want to come back and reflect on this. So what topics in your field might you be passionate about? That's one of the things that we teased out last time. And then how would you build that into an argument? Again, that was the output from 2 weeks ago. So then the next question becomes, where do you want to publish? Does this style of publication adhere to the 5-topic model? So we discussed that an argument is a claim backed up by evidence with a warrant or discussion of how the evidence in fact circles back to the claim, and that each chapter, if you're doing a dissertation or a thesis, or the in a smaller document, every section adds up to being one or more of those argumentative parts. So then we get this question of, okay, so what goes where? We know that the funnel that we all write to as researchers is background, literature, methodology, results to findings and discussion. A basic 5-part funnel. And my suggestion there is that then a middle ground between you having your ideas about where your argument's going to take your writing and the actually getting started putting ideas on paper or beginning to dictate is for you to look up the authors that you admire and to do a similar critique to the one I did about their work. So critique their arguments just as I critiqued the ones we were just looking at. It may show up in their headings. If you're looking at journals, it probably won't be so much in your headings as in the first sentence of every paragraph, but you'll be able to track how the thoughts go through background, literature, methodology, results, and findings. And then you can decide, it allows you to say, I really like this author, I'm not so fond of that one. Look at how they are similar and different. Look at how they use language. Do I like it? Do I not like it? And plot your own course. So I'll stop for just a minute If you're in the room, raise your hand if you have any questions or you want to type in any comments. And if so, I'll wait. So we'll see if any. Adrienne says that she can see how the woman's passion shines through, and she weaves her passion argument back into the larger real world context. It highlights the relevance and timeliness of her passion. Yeah, that was just very excellently written from the point of view of academics. I was out to find academics who could write with passion, and I thought she did an excellent job. And her whole document was well thought out. So once again, having a good model is very useful. And you can take that one or others. And they take a bit of looking, but the strategy that we use to look through the headings and take them apart, if we're thinking critically, does a good job of showing us how we might move forward. Anybody else? Thank you, Adrienne. Anybody else? Raise your hand. If not, all right, so the second section is moving past having the argument to writing. And as I would do this myself, not so much for the things I've written before, like books or journal articles, but I was called upon as a business owner to write a white paper. I had no idea really what was in a white paper. So I used the same structure to determine what people typically were looking for in that context, how other authors did it. I found some papers that even told you what to put where. And then I analyzed them all side by side and I plotted my own course. That's the basic exercise. So I'm just going to make up. Raise your hand in here if you would like to be writing a journal article this summer. Do we have any journal article writers? We might not. We might, and one hand, Carla's good, one hand. If I'm sure that in the couple hundred people who are also watching by recording, several of you are wondering, yes, a couple people are wondering whether or not it's a good time to get that first or second journal publication under your belt. Good summer's often a good time for that. So what are your models going to be? Well, you want to take one or more articles from the journals you want to publish in. You want one of those at least to be from an author you personally cite, or you respect their work for many reasons. It would be useful if you also took a look at what awards are out there, awards of distinction, and you found a journal article written by an author who had won some kind of award. Now, in the journal world, in the dissertation or thesis world, there are awards given to dissertations and theses, so you can find them and also have it be the right kind of document. In this case, we don't generally give awards to our journal articles, but people who win awards for their writing also write journals. So you might have a twofold search. In that process, keep an eye out for one that is terribly readable. You just like the way the author addresses their reader. Do you like to be addressed, and is it appropriate in your field to be addressed as you? Do you like that personal feeling and touch? Or is your field, and is it appropriate to put everything at arm's length? And if so, then how does someone who writes at that angle end up showing that they care? Because the outcome of this set of 4 weeks is to write something that shows how much you care. And what if you are looking at dissertations or thesis, if that's the path you're on, as I know it is for Sarah and a few other people, then absolutely one of these models should be from your university and your supervisor, advisor committee chair, whatever your university calls the people who are directly responsible for passing you. Remember that you're assessing not just their background, literature, methodology, results, and discussion, but now we've taken it up a notch and you're discussing their claim, the first evidence that they have for that claim, how the warrant is that their methodology allows that evidence to come to the fore in a new way, and that their results, thereby requiring another warrant that comes up with the discussion, all add up in the circle that is that claim. And the claim will likely show up in small ways. We need transitions as we write. So you'll see it added to over and over again. Some authors like to make a big, bold claim at the beginning, and then each section makes a little claim that ultimately the warrant is it adds up to the big, bold one. Other authors, although perhaps less common, like to make lots of little like stepping stone claims that add up, then one warrant ties them together. So there's some variations on this theme of claim, evidence, and warrant within our research world. Nevertheless, those are the two structures you're needing to critically assess. So then your exercise is to plot their headings, those authors' headings, and compare what they put where. Also, I suggest you critically analyze their voice, how passion shows, where it shows. Is it hinted at, or is it clearly stated? Perhaps their passion is about the rigor and properties of research in their field. And so you'll know that when how they put that together, and you also want to critically analyze the transitions they make from one area to another. So you'll want to rate which one for yourself in your own privacy of your own. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to write. You want to rate the people that you have plotted and critically analyzed, and you want to determine where you want to go. And then you should have a sense of why that is true. So this really long post just came in, I have to look at. So Adrian found a language learning outstanding article of the year. Bravo, Adrian. So here is a journal article, free to download. The members of the Board of Directors of Language Learning are pleased to continue our annual award for the article that the board members consider to be the most outstanding among those published in the previous year's journal. I've never seen this in a journal before. So perhaps others of you will have journals in your field that are that also have awards. So I take that back. It's quite possible you can find one that has an award. And then they go further. They tell her or other linguists why this journal article is exceptional, what it does. She does this while comparing child and adult learners. So it's a complicated methodology. She tests 2 sets of predictions in an impressively comprehensive and empirically sound manner. So that shows her caring. Impressively sound and comprehensive and empirically sound is a way we are passionate. Might not be a way that the rest of the world finds passion, but it certainly is true for those of us in a particular field. The article is impressive in its goals, its detailed planning, its methods, its ecological validity, and its results, which illustrate the ways in which input influences acquisition. That's a lovely, lovely, congratulations to that author. And that's a fabulous award. I'm sure it made the author feel excellent. So good. this is the kind of accolade we strive for when we really care about what we're doing and how it can be well done in our fields. Okay, so we've looked at some possibilities. We've got a good model. We've got a good outline. And so I just wanted to close up with, and then we open it wide for conversation, is to some things that are in our library that you might find useful if you know about them or you don't, that have to do with writing. So for anyone who is challenged by not getting themselves to build a good writing habit, there's the 30-day writing challenge. It's a series of 5-minute videos with the intention of giving you a little snippet of something about writing in order to kick off your writing for the day. Perhaps a 30-day challenge isn't enough, but you're a little stale on your writing, or you're not quite confident, and so you might choose the 10-day writing boost. Those are delivered. All of this is on the left-hand side is delivered by email. The Friday academic writing emails are just a little boost every Friday. And then we have 2 box sets. A box set is 10 or 12 videos on a topic, or 5 to 7 videos on a topic, and some links. And we have one on literature review and another on getting published, both of which might be useful for this audience. And then some videos that came from our most recent webinar series, Strategies for Composing Academic Papers, Paraphrasing How to Do It, one of our more popular videos, Critical Analysis as a Door to Success, and Writing Tips that every graduate student needs. These, again, are in the handouts, in the slides as PDFs, so that you'll be able to click on them later if it's appropriate to you. And what are we going to do as these 4 sessions progress? Well, my intention was that in the first 2 weeks, you'd be seriously honing into your argument. In the next 2 weeks, now and the 2 following, you'll be writing. And then in session 3, we're going to talk about revision. It's big, complicated, takes way more time than you think it's going to. As Sarah mentioned, the agony of it. It is where kind of we meet our own self in the written word in our process. So there's some tips and tricks and processes that go with that make it a bit easier. It's never without pain, perhaps, but it is the piece that, if you do it well, will make your writing shine. So very, very important, and we'll discuss that next time with an exercise that will help you move then from revision into, okay, what happens? Where do you want to, how do you get started with the looking at publication? And then session 4, we'll discuss. If any of you have things that you want us to discuss as a group, great, we'll do that. We'll run through the steps from an idea to publication, what editors are looking for, how you approach them, what that process is like, and how to keep the passion through the process of peer review, which is its own process. And then we'll leave for the summer with some action steps that I hope you have found very useful. Does anyone have questions or comments as you're writing them? I just want to point out that the professional development we have going this summer, recommending Monday motivations to keep you in the game. Most or some of you don't have much going on campus, so it's a great time to check out the Monday motivations. The Friday academic writing emails, the same thing. If you don't have the app is good in that it gives you little motivations and gives you something to think about and use on your phone. Also allows you to have access to previous webinars. And the webinars coming up, we have Keep Up the Summer Work. It happens in the next hour. What you can do to write consistently is this Thursday. In 2 weeks from today, Write Your Passion number 3, and something on reflective reading. So hope everyone goes to that SurveyMonkey, our web experience link after this, and or right now, and fills it out. It's something we hope you do every time. We need quantitative data that is at all indicative of the numbers of people that now are attending our webinars to really see how we're doing. So big request from everybody who's watching here in the room or by recording to please fill out the survey, keep filling out the survey, give us the nuance of when we're spot on and when we're not, and help us guide the ship that is this professional experience the right direction. So with that, I'll stop talking, and perhaps people in the room will have things to say. But in the meantime, I will say goodbye to the people who are watching by recording, and I hope to see you again in a couple of weeks.